Okay, folks, we're going to talk today about the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. Now, there is a huge Democrat uproar since this latest slate of decisions has come down from the Supreme Court, one of which overturned Roe v. Wade, which is something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. Other rulings against the Environmental Protection Agency. You also had a major gun rights victory. So you've got a lot of Democrats who are crying out against the fact that this Supreme Court is somehow illegitimate, and therefore the court needs to be packed. You need to put four more justices on the court. By the Senate and the House should agree to expand the court to 13 justices so that Biden can place four liberal justices on the court and then, turn it into a 7-6 liberal court. Now, I want to go back to the Constitution on this because I have to admit to a little bit of naivete when it comes to Supreme Court appointments. See, my thinking has always been that the president and the Senate were always looking for the best of the best. And I was never really impressed with the checks and balances that were applied to the court by the president and the legislature. Because you've got to remember that the Constitution sets up a tripartite government. You have three branches of government, and all of these branches are set to conflict with each other. Their job is to conflict with each other so that only those things upon which they all agree are actually going to make it into the body of legislation that flows out from the Constitution. So you've got things like Congress can pass a law, but the president has to approve it. He can also veto it. But Congress can also override the president's veto. So those are some checks and balances going on there. Another check and balance that has been overused these last few years is Congress's power of impeachment. Congress can impeach the president, and then, if the Senate removes, the House would impeach and the Senate would remove, and then the president could be barred from future office. That's what they tried to do to President Trump, except they overreached instead of just going for the lesser charges on which they might have actually been able to convict him. So you have this system of checks and balances where the president can do things to Congress, Congress can do things to the president, and then the Supreme Court's power is the ability to declare acts of the president or acts of Congress, laws passed by Congress, unconstitutional. The Supreme Court can basically say, look, Congress, President, you can't do that under our constitutional system of law, at which point the President and Congress have to stop and try something else. Now, the check and balance that is levied against the Supreme Court by the executive branch is simply the fact that it is the president who nominates Supreme Court justices, and it is the Senate who confirms Supreme Court justices. Plus, you also have the same impeachment and removal power in Congress that can be levied against the Supreme Court as well. People have been saying lately that the justices ought to be, the Republican justices that Trump appointed ought to be impeached and removed for having lied about their position on Roe v. Wade, even though, saying something is standing law now does not necessarily mean it can't be overturned by a future case. We all know that Plessy versus Ferguson was standing law for 60 years and was then overturned by a later Supreme Court in Brown v. Board of Education. So everybody complaining that Roe v. Wade has been settled law for 50 years, well, do you want us to go back and revisit Plessy as well? See if we need to, prop that back up? I don't think you do. So let's not go on the tenure and length of life argument that some of these Democrats have been going for. It's just kind of ridiculous. Now, getting to the check and balance of the nomination, the nomination by the president and the confirmation by the Senate, I never really was all that impressed by that, because all you're doing is choosing who's going to sit on the court, and you're going to go for the best judge, right? You're going to go for the best people for the job, right? Of course, silly me, that was my naivete. The point of the president's appointing judges is that the president wants to appoint judges whom he thinks are going to favor his acts of power. He wants a judge in there who's not going to overturn the actions he takes. Likewise, the Senate, their vested interest is to make sure that the judge that they confirm is going to be agreeable to the states where they're coming from, because, of course, the Supreme Court has power to rule over state laws as well as federal laws, and since the Senate is supposed to be the representative of the state bureaucracies, the state legislatures, and represent the states in that capacity, not in a popular capacity as the House of Representatives does, then the Senate too has an interest of making sure that it only confirms judges who are going to be agreeable to themselves. Now, how this is all kind of worked out over the years, because there's really no list of specific qualifications for Supreme Court justices in the Constitution or judges of any other caliber. Basically, the president can appoint whoever he wants, doesn't even have to be a judge. John Roberts himself, who's Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, I don't think he ever was a judge. He was a prosecutor at times. So you don't have to have any specific set of qualifications for the Supreme Court other than the president who nominates you and the Senate who confirms you think that you're going to rule their way. That's really what they're looking for. That's really what it is they want. And so this idea that Trump appointed these 3 justices and they're ruling his way, that says nothing about the legitimacy of SCOTUS, because all that is SCOTUS acting as designed. The president installed these judges precisely because he thought they were going to rule his way. And that's the same thing that Biden has done with Ketanji Brown Jackson. Breyer retired. Biden wanted another Breyer, so he got somebody who was actually a law clerk for Breyer and who rose through the ranks of the judiciary, and now has replaced Breyer with essentially a black female Breyer. That's basically the evaluation that people have made of Ketanji Brown Jackson's stance. So Biden and Trump together are just acting as presidents are supposed to act, and the Senate, in trying to grill these prospective judges and saying, how do you think you're going to rule on this? How do you think you're going to rule on that? Well, they're just trying to get comfortable with the idea of this particular judge and think, okay, yeah, I guess I can trust this judge not to do things that are too crazy. But it's never a guarantee. I mean, there's been plenty of examples of judges that were appointed by Republican presidents who went completely off, who as far as, you know, their nominators or the Republican Party at the time were concerned, went completely off the reservation. You had David Souter. He was a Bush appointee, and he wound up being a more liberal justice than anybody expected. So you all have always had justices who, you know, have said, yes, I kind of agree on this and thus and so. And, you know, these are justices who can't really say how they're going to vote. If they did that, it would be an ethical breach. You can't say in advance how you're going to vote on any given issue. So the whole idea that the senators would even ask questions like, how do you intend to vote on Roe v. Wade? How do you intend to vote on, you know, if you had a Heller case come before you? Well, every case is different, and every case requires that you look at the specific set of facts that you have on hand and make a ruling in that specific case. So I don't even know what it is the Senate confirmation hearings are designed to suss out, other than whether or not this judge is just a complete incompetent, on whether or not this judge just has no judicial wherewithal whatsoever. Generally speaking, until I think it was Robert Bork, who, you know, there was major concern that he would actually be against Roe v. Wade and other such acts of prior Supreme Courts, that generally the deference was given to the president, and so long as the president wasn't just trying to do a completely nepotistic or incompetent appointment, the Senate would go along with whoever it was that the president would nominate. And starting with Robert Bork, the intensity cranked up to the point where Bork failed to become a Supreme Court justice, and later there was a Bush appointee who, a black female Bush appointee who he wanted to elevate to the Supreme Court, who was filibustered by none other than Joe Biden. So yeah, you've got the whole idea is that the president nominating people who are going to vote his way is not a bug, it's a feature. And the Senate is there to try and make sure he doesn't just, nominate somebody who's going to blank slate the whole thing and vote the president's way no matter what necessarily. We want a judge of some sort of qualifications, a judge who actually has some sort of judicial philosophy. But what really gets me is that the Democrats are saying that because Trump has these three appointees who are so firmly in his pocket on the Supreme Court, that somehow the court is illegitimate for that reason. But what is their response? What is their response? They want to pack the court. And what is packing the court? Well, packing the court is doing exactly what Trump did. Packing the court is going to be opening up 4 more seats on the Supreme Court and then packing it with people that are going to vote the way Biden wants. How are you restoring the legitimacy of the court in that way? How are you doing that? All you're doing is just more of the same. It's like your call for legitimacy means absolutely nothing. And it does mean absolutely nothing, because the only thing the Democrats are upset about, the only thing Democrats are ever upset about when it comes to the Supreme Court, is that the Supreme Court doesn't vote their way. I mean, think about Roe v. Wade. Do you think that the Democrats complained about Roe v. Wade when it was decided by 7 white men? No, of course not, because those 7 white men voted the way they wanted them to vote. And if the Supreme Court today consisted of 9 white men who voted for to reaffirm and uphold Roe v. Wade, the Democrats would have no problem. It would be the most legitimate SCOTUS ever. This whole legitimacy thing is just a shell. And the worst part is they keep bringing in this idea of minority rule as being the reason for the illegitimacy, as though the fact that the populations in these various states that represent a good portion of the Senate, even though, it takes 50 Democrats, it takes Democrats as well, not 50 Democrats, but it takes Democrats as well to confirm appointees. You have the proportion of the population represented by Republicans in the Senate as being smaller than that of the Democrats, because the Democrats control the larger population states like California and New York, and they have such a glaringly offset population compared to the rest of the country that if you look at those population distributions, they don't match. You have Republicans actually in the minority. But again, here's the thing: the Senate is not supposed to be representative of the population of the United States. The Senate is supposed to be representative of the bureaucracies of the states. So every state has one government, and therefore every 2 senators represent one government. It's perfectly proportional so far as those senators are concerned. And the only reason that people are crying foul is because now we have the 17th Amendment, which should absolutely be repealed. And the 17th Amendment basically makes it each senator dependent on the popular vote of the entire state. Absolutely should be repealed. And that should be one of the things that if enough Republicans were ever to get into the Senate such that you could get a 2/3 majority vote, and I don't see this ever happening unless it's in a constitutional convention, honestly. A constitutional convention, if it ever comes up, need to go and pass the Senate Restoration Amendment that stupid phone need to pass the Senate Restoration Amendment that's in my Cultural Bill of Rights. Just go look at that video and check that out. So this whole legitimacy thing is just a huge smokescreen to cover up the Democrats' disappointment that they don't win enough elections to be of any account. I mean, that's really the problem. They don't win enough elections at the right time. They're not in control of the Senate at the right time. They don't get to do just whatever they want, and therefore they call the Supreme Court illegitimate. And it's pathetic. It's like they're here they are complaining about how our election system was deemed illegitimate by millions of Americans who voted for Trump. And yet, when they don't get their way on these judicial rulings, all they do is they turn right back around and claim illegitimacy on the part of the Supreme Court. It's not that either of these institutions necessarily are illegitimate. It's that people didn't get their way, and they were pissed about that. And that's all that's happening now. You've got a bunch of big babies on 1/6. You had a bunch of big babies overrun the Capitol, and then now you're having a bunch of big babies complaining about the Supreme Court rulings. But legitimacy has nothing to do with it. The court is the same as it's always been. You have always had presidents nominating who they thought would pass their agendas and approve of their agendas, and you've always had the Senate trying to at least make sure that those appointees were competent to some degree. And, in later years, would also be amenable to their own party's agendas. That's just the way the Constitution's written, and so, if you're going to want to go against the Constitution like that, well, that's fine, but I don't think you're going to get a lot of support from anybody. I'm Mike Partika. Thanks for watching, and do subscribe if you haven't already so that you can be notified of my future videos, and I will talk to you later.